The Swift, when it was first launched in 2005, was like that cool uncle who would liven up those boring family functions. It injected a much-needed dose of youth and funk into the then staid Maruti Suzuki lineup. It was like the working man and woman's Mini. It was edgy and different, and it sold like hotcakes. So when time came to refresh it in 2011, Maruti Suzuki didn't do much. It was just a slight nip and tuck. Because, well, why mess with a good thing? It goes back to that old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But this time, they've gone the whole hog. And it looks like $1 million. It looks, in fact, a little bit like a Jaguar F-Type sports car. Because, well, if you're going to take inspiration, you may as well take inspiration from the best. The question is, does it drive like $1 million? Because that's really what cemented the Swift's reputation and made it the icon that it's become. And that's what we're here to find out. The Swift is one of my favorite hatchbacks, and the brand new Swift has got rave reviews since it was launched internationally. Now, it's based on the new hardtech platform, which is the same platform that underpins the new Baleno and the Desire, of course. So from the driver's seat, it actually feels quite similar. So there are two powertrain options to choose from, or two engine options I should say, because both models get the option for the first time of the automatic gear shift technology, what Maruti calls the AGS, which essentially is the AMT, the automated manual transmission. The one that we're driving currently is a 5-speed manual, Fiat-sourced 1.3-liter turbo diesel, which is a very, very familiar motor, 74 horsepower at 4,000 RPM and 190 Newton meters of torque at 2,000 RPM. The K-Series 1.2-liter petrol engine is the second engine option, which produces 84 horsepower at 6,200 RPM and 113 Newton meters of torque at 4,200 RPM. Both engines feel very familiar from behind the steering wheel. I do wish the petrol engine had a little bit more grunt. You really have to rev it to get it to really get going, but it is such an incredibly smooth engine that you don't mind revving the nuts off it at all. Getting to 6,000 RPM or a little over 6,000 RPM is no sweat whatsoever, but you do miss the low-end grunt in that particular engine. And that's where the diesel comes in, because it's a lot more drivable in its mid-range. Full torque kicks in at 2,000 RPM, so it is extremely drivable. The Achilles heel of this engine now, of course, is that it has a fairly noticeable turbo lag, anything under 2,000 RPM. 1,800 RPM is really when the engine starts to come alive, and post 2,000 RPM, 2,000 to 4,000 RPM is really the meat of the power band. The good thing is that if you stick within that rev range, it is an extremely punchy motor. We've only been driving this car a brief period, but the high-speed stability is very, very good, and the ride quality is absolutely fantastic. We haven't had a chance to get into the ghats as yet. We're on our way to Lonavala. So once we get into the twisties, we'll get a sense of whether the Swift retains that sense of being chuckable and the driving pleasure that it's known for. Right, so we are finally in what is traditional Swift territory. We are finally in the ghats. Now, a couple of things about the general driving experience to begin with. In front of me, I've got a set of beautiful round gauges. And we talked about the styling of the Swift being inspired by the Jag F-Type. These gauges are definitely inspired by the Jag F-Type. They're a set of two round hooded gauges that have a slightly orange angry glow to them, and they do look very sporty indeed. Also, the driving position is really, really good. I've got a seat that is not only very comfortable, but it's got these really nice side bolsters which hold you in place when you're going through some tight bends. I'm also seated facing a beautiful 3-spoke flat bottom steering wheel. So it feels like a really, really sporty, spot-on driving position with all the controls really nicely laid out. Now the cabin is very clean, very well laid out, and it feels really well bolted together as well. Yes, there are a couple of sections of hard, flat plastic, but nothing that really offends the eye or feels like it's out of place. It feels like a really well put together cabin, and it actually feels really good quality as well. Now from the outside, when you shut the door, it feels really quite light, but again, that's because of the new platform and the car being 80 kilos lighter than the previous generation model. To talk about how it feels in the carts itself, I have to say that the driving experience with these two particular engines, with the older powertrains, is not that inspiring. It feels very well planted, it feels very refined, it feels grown up actually. The previous Swift would dart into corners, and if you were a little naughty with it, it would even wag its tail a little bit. This one feels a lot more refined, a lot more stable, a lot more grown up, but it doesn't dart into corners like the previous generation car did. The only thing missing from the Swift is that it feels a little bit homogeneous. It feels very, very similar to Maruti's other machines, and it seems to have that little bit of an edge that the car used to have seems to have been ironed out in the search for refinement and in the search for comfort. So again, for all the driving enthusiasts out there, we might have to wait for a slightly edgier version in terms of sheer performance, but from the standpoint of comfort, from the standpoint of everyday usability, from the standpoint of space, because there's a lot more space inside the cabin, and any complaints about the older Swift being tight on cabin space in the back and tight on luggage space is taken away with this car, because it's a lot more usable and a lot more comfortable on that front. Of course, that begs the question that why would somebody pay more for a Baleno which doesn't feel very different, and personally, if you ask me, this car looks edgier, it looks a little bit more cohesive, it looks a little bit nicer even. In profile, it's very clean. It's got the door handles recessed into the C-pillar, so it's got a coupe-like roof line. It looks really nice from the front. It looks very clean and very nice from the back. And also inside the cabin, it looks very cohesive and very well put together. So expect there to be a fair amount of cannibalization within the Maruti portfolio when the prices for this car are announced at the Auto Expo in early February.